Okay, Grandpa. So we'll start with the questions I wrote down for you
Okay.
last time, and then we can move into your cars.
All right.
You want to
Okay, Mike.
read the question and then answer.
All right. Greatest achievement.
Okay.
Looking back over my life, there are many, many things, but there's two things that are great. One is planting two churches. But aside from that was my education. And working my way through college, my bachelor's degrees, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Theology, Master of Divinity, but the apex was my doctorate, PhD. My proudest moment of Regina and Mike, and most critical, was when each became Christians. They both made that individual decision. And my proudest moment was when you and Sarah and Ben and Sam all became Christians. My biggest disappointment and failure was when the church turned on me and I lost my position. It probably worked out for good, but at the time it was very painful. Okay, my fondest memory was hitchhiking across America twice.
Whoa.
And the first time was the most memorable. It was a very much an adventure. I had a suitcase that was a metal suitcase.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm going to walk you through that trip a little bit.
Ooh, okay.
So, being unprepared, as you are when you try some adventure, I didn't have a raincoat, which is really dumb. And I didn't have an umbrella. And so I got a short trip. I can't even remember who it was that picked me up the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember where they took me and where they left me off. In a cornfield, on the road, away from everything. And it began to rain. Not just a little bit, pour down rain. And there was no trees, no place to get underneath anything. It was just a road where he turned off to go to his farm way down the road. So this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm standing with water running off my fingers. And I'm thinking, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And so finally somebody stopped. And again, I can't remember who that was. It picked me up. It was a soldier. And he said, well, I'm going to the Army base.
Mm-hmm.
So he dropped me off in front of the gate. And the rain had stopped. But I was just soaked. And I'm standing there in the rain with my thumb out. Oh, and on the suitcase I had a little sign. And I had written, Bible student, L.A. So here I am standing in front of this Missouri base, which I can't think of the name of right now. But anyway, a truck pulled up, a milk truck. And he said, well, there's room in the back. Just throw it in the back and just jump up front. And I said, I am really wet, man. Are you sure you want me on your seat? He said, oh, it'll shed the water. Don't worry. So I get in the truck, and we travel into Joplin, Missouri. And then he said, now I'm going to be going into town, and you're going on, so let me get your suitcase. And he pulled my suitcase out, and it was covered with ice, because that was a freeze thing in the back.
Oh.
So here I have two suitcases, one little one and one big one.
Yeah.
Use the little one for a stand, and then put the big one on top. So he let me off on the edge of town, and I said, oh, it's starting to rain again. I am not standing in the rain. So I walked down somebody's sidewalk, up on their porch. I said, they can send me to jail, but I am not going to stand in the rain anymore tonight. So finally I decided the rain passed, and so I stepped out, and a water truck came by, and the guy said to me, he said, I'm not going very far, and I'll be going real slow. I said, anything will be fine, thank you. And so he and his little sister was in the cab, and he had those water bottles, that you have for bottled water. So I put my rigs up and everything, and we start off, and he zigzags all across the edge of Oklahoma and the edge of Missouri. And he said, I told you it was going to take all day. I said, yeah, it's all right. I'm just glad to be out of the rain. And so, I'm always a helper, and I thought, well, I'll help him,
Yeah.
And I have very little money. So I picked up one of the bottles to help him and broke it.
No.
So I said, it wasn't no water in it, it was empty. I said, well, what is that worth? He said, that's $2.50. Well, I'll pay for it because I broke it. No, it's all right. No, I said, no, I broke it. I'll pay for it. He said, okay. So I gave him $2.50. So we get about halfway to
I'm okay. Thanks, Cam.
get about halfway to the next big town in Oklahoma. For the moment, that's Texas. It's well, anyway, it's the next. There's two large towns, Oklahoma City and this other one, and we're close to that first one.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, the sun's going down. He said, why don't you come home with me? I said, huh?
What?
Yeah. And so I said, where do you live? He said, on the reservation. No, I think I better keep going.
Wow.
And so I didn't take him up on it, but that was quite an offer.
He was American Indian.
Yes, he was, full-blooded Cherokee. So he let me off, and he says, I wish you well. So there I am, again, standing, though the rain has stopped, which is nice.
Yeah.
And two Indians pull up and say, where are you going? And I said, going west. And whether they could read or not, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, jump in. We're going there too. We'll drop you off. So they took me into the town and let me off on the edge of town. So I said, this is really turning into a big adventure. And so I'm standing there maybe for an hour, and a guy pulls up with an Illinois license plate. And I said, wonder where he's going. He says, you need a ride? And I said, yeah. He said, now I'm not going to L.A., but he said, I am going west. And so I said, okay. And I put my stuff in his back, and I said, are you traveling by yourself? He said, yeah, my wife is back home, and she wanted me to have my own time, so I'm on my way. And I said, well, where's your home? And he said, and I still remember, Danville, Illinois. And so we start off, and we get into the main town. He says, now I'm going to spend the night in the hotel. I thought, oh, great, okay. I figured to get out. He said, but I'll tell you what, I'll get one with 2 beds, and if you don't mind being in the same room with me, I got a place for you to sleep tonight.
Wow.
Won't cost you anything. I said, I don't know about, wasn't too sure about this, but I thought, well, I've taken a lot of risks so far.
Yeah.
So we went in. As soon as he hit the bed, his bed, he was asleep, snoring like a sawmill. And I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. Hadn't slept for, 30 hours. So I went to sleep. We woke up, went downstairs, got some breakfast. He said, now, I'm not going to Amarillo from here. He said, I'm going to a small town south of Amarillo, but you ought to be able to get a ride from there up to Amarillo, Texas, which is on the main 66. I remember I'm on 66 the whole time.
Right.
So he drops me off. Big mistake number one. Because the suitcases were full of books, very heavy.
Oh, wow.
And he let me off in town. In order to get to this Podunk Highway back to 66, I had to lug my suitcases out to the edge of town. Oh, they were heavy.
Whoa.
And I said, never going to let anybody let me off down in the middle of a town again. I'm going to ask them either let me off the front of town or in the edge of town, but never in the town. So off, I finally am standing in, and there had been some rain over in more rain over in Oklahoma, which is where I was really, the edge of it. And two guys pulled up in a 1954 Ford. Oh, where you headed, man? I said, well, nobody can read. I said, I'm going to L.A., and I'm just trying to get back up to Amarillo so I can get on the main drag to go to California. Mm-hmm. Oh, no problem. Jump in the back. So I jumped in the back. The seat in the back of this car was not attached very well. I don't know if you know, there's a latch that in the old cars, you latch the seat underneath the backrest.
Okay.
So it's loose, I sit down, okay. So I didn't complain or anything. I just got in the back seat. And then I looked over at this one guy. He had red hair. His pants were rolled up over his knees, had no shoes on. And there was another guy who was driving. And I could smell alcohol. I thought, ooh. Oh, no. I don't like this. Yeah. And so I was about ready to be, get off. And the guy that was on the side with the rolled up pants and everything said, oh, you probably noticed my pants rolled up. He said, we went off in a ditch, and he said, I had to get out and push this car out of the rain-filled ditch, and he said, that's why I don't have any shoes on. Oh, well, I felt better. And then no talk for a little bit. The guy behind the wheel never said hardly anything. Then all of a sudden, the guy on the right reached over his bare foot and put it on top of the accelerator foot of the car and shoves it to the floor. What? And he said, Luke, this boy's in a hurry. He's trying to get to California. Let's get going. He said, Jess, or whatever his name was, take your foot off my foot. Come on, Luke. He's in a hurry. I said, take your foot off my foot. We're doing about 100 miles an hour.
Whoa.
And he said, all right. So he pulls his foot off. And every time he accelerates, I'm in this back seat that's rocking back and forth.
Yeah.
And so he didn't say anything for a little while, and then he whipped his foot back on the accelerator, pushed it all the way to the floor, said, Luke, we got to keep going. And he said, Jess, or whatever it was, he said, take your foot off my foot. I'll do the driving. All right. So that's how we did, up and down the road all the way to Amarillo.
Wow.
I was very glad to be out of that car. So he let me off on the outskirts of Amarillo. And it was warm, because we're now in the Sun Belt. And I'm thinking, oh, that's halfway, by the way. Halfway to California from Cincinnati.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, well, I don't know how this is going to end. So I'm sitting there. A couple more soldiers come up, asked me if I need a ride, and I said, yeah, sure do. He said, we're going to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ooh, that's out of the way.
Yeah.
So I get in the car, and not much happens. These guys are sober. That was nice. And so we drove through the late afternoon, evening, and just as the sun went down, we were in Albuquerque. And I said, guys, would you mind taking me to the edge of town? I said, my suitcase is so heavy, I can hardly carry him up to the edge of town. Oh, no problem. So they pulled up. It was a little service station right there, and left me off. And I'm on the edge of the desert. Because if you know anything about Albuquerque to L.A., there's just a bunch of Indian towns.
Yeah.
And there's not much in between.
Huh.
So I'm sitting there going, boy, now what? And it's night. It's getting night. So I'm sitting there on the edge. Actually, my suitcases are a little more on this side of the pumps. And some guy pulls into a thing and puts a little gas in his car. And I'm just like, wonder where he's going. Leaned over, California license plates.
What?
Oh, man, I got myself a ride.
Jackpot.
Maybe. So I said, where are you headed? L.A.? Oh, yes.
Nice.
I'll
take a little more, Grandma. Thank you.
You got room for one more? He said, yeah, no problem. So he grabbed my suitcase, opened up the trunk. No lights in the car inside, none. He throws my suitcase in the back, and I said, you going to L.A.? And he said, yeah, if my $7 holds out. He only has $7 for gas to get to L.A.
Whoa.
Now, you have to understand gas was cheap back then. The cheapest we ever got gas was 11 cents a gallon. But that was a different trip. In the area where we're traveling at this time, it ran from between 18 and 24 cents a gallon.
No.
Okay, so here we are, and I'm like, oh, great. And I get in the car, and what the heck happened to this car? It was full of rags stuffed inside of the upholstery. And I'm like, what is this? I mean, the outside of the car is pristine. Brand new paint job, really nice. He said we'd stop and eat, but he said we got one of those Texas twisters, and it grabbed all our food, went up in the sky, and we don't have anything.
What?
And who's we? And all of a sudden, right by my ear, a woman's voice. The children are getting hungry. I'm like, whoa.
What?
Because there was no lights inside the car, so I didn't see anybody in the back.
Yeah.
And there were 2 kids back there with his wife.
What?
He said, we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't you worry, hon. Don't you worry. And I said, well, what happened to your car? He said, well, we have relatives in the mountains, and we went to visit them. He says, I work in L.A., and he said, they got in this car and just tore it up. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. He said they were like a bunch of animals. They just got a hold of every bit of upholstery and just ripped it out of the car.
Wow.
And I just said to my wife, we're leaving. No more of this. Because he had restored the car.
No.
Yeah, so he says, but we're going to make it. We're going to make it. I said, oh, I hope so. So he would drive up to the top of a rise, turn the key off, coast all the way down to the bottom, turn the key on, start the car, go up the next hill to the top, turn the key off, coast all the way down. He's got it figured he's going to make it to California by just rolling down half of the hills.
Oh, no.
So he didn't do it every time, but almost every time.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, man, how can this be? I mean, strange people.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got down the road. Albuquerque, there's quite a ways before you get to Arizona. And somewhere in the middle of the desert, he got tired, and I said, "Do you want me to drive?" And he said, No, you can't drive this car." I said, "Okay." And so he pulled over, and I was so tired. I fell asleep laying against the window. And morning came, and I woke up. And he was still sleeping, and they were sleeping in the back. I had a chance to look at them. They just folks. And all of a sudden he woke up, and he went, "Oh, well, we got to get going." And so he said, "Let me start the car." And he put the key in the ignition, and the engine caught fire right in front of us. And I went, "Now what?" And so he opens up the door, grabs some of those rags to put the fire out. Well, he also grabbed my coat. So he runs out, and he's like this, so his arms in the air, looks up and sees just my coat, and the engine's on fire. He runs back, puts my coat down, get more rags, gets up, put the fire out. Well, I knew enough about cars by that time that this may not be redeemable.
Oh, wow.
Because you got electrical stuff and all that, and gasoline, but he got the fire out.
Oh, wow.
He said, "I've worked on this car a lot." He said, "I'll get it going." So he had some tape and stuff, and he took some wires and hooked them back up and worked on it maybe for an hour. Said, "Okay, we're going to try it again." Start it up. And away we go down the road.
Wow.
So here we are now. We've gotten all the way through most of Arizona. And we're getting close to Needles. And I'm thinking, I'm going to make it home.
Yeah.
And so I had probably with me $10. And the wife again right at my ears said, "Children getting awful hungry." I can't remember his name. And I'm getting hungry. I mean, we haven't eaten anything. And he says, "Well, hon, we just don't have any money. We just got a few dollars to pay for the gas." So Mr. Magnanimous, myself, I thought, well, I've had a nice ride. I'll give him $5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost home. "Oh, no, I don't borrow money." I said, no, a gift. This is a gift. And he said, "Well, I don't know." Okay. So he pulls into a little corner grocery on the corner of some old town. He goes in and buys a pound of bologna and a loaf of bread and some mayonnaise. Now you can imagine those kids, I've eaten before they did. And so they're starving. And so he said to his wife, Della or whatever it was, and he said, "Well, fix some sandwiches, honey." And so she got the sandwiches real slow, putting the mayonnaise on, putting the meat on. We didn't have any lettuce to go on it. And handed me the sandwich. I said, no. You give it to the children. "Oh, no. Adults first." I said, "No. In this case, children first."
Wow.
And because I paid for it, they said, "Okay." So she gave it, and the kids like 3 bites, and they ate the whole sandwich down. They're starving. I ate. We all ate. Sat there. It tasted wonderful. And so we're in the middle of California.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "By the way, my family lives in Yucca Valley, and I happen to know a shortcut off of 66 that goes to 29 Palms and then goes right up, and it's the same distance." if you were to go on straight on 66, or if you to go on the Amboy cutoff.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, just tell me where to go, and off we go over one of the worst areas in all California, by the way, but I wasn't thinking about that. And because there's hardly any traffic on that thing, so we're traveling, and this is where Dad put in a lot of buildings and such. And so we're going and going and going, and then we hit 29 Palms. I said, even if I get off here, I said, almost home. And then the next town was Joshua Tree. We stopped at Joshua Tree for a second. I said, it's the next town. So he pulls up and he says, which house? And I said, it's that one right there. He pulls up in front of my house. And he says, now give me your address, because I want to send that money you gave us. I said, no, don't you even think about it.
Wow.
So I got out of the car and looked over. It was daylight. And there was my brother Jack underneath my car with the rear end laying down on the ground. And of course, it didn't make me very happy. The only thing he was supposed to do was start it up once a month. Well, he had blown the engine, blown the tranny, and blown the rear end, and raced it, and destroyed my favorite car.
No.
Yeah.
What car was that?
1941 Ford.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's my most interesting adventure.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's a good segue into the cars.
Yeah.
I think we
Got 2 or 3 more here.
Okay, a few more questions. Good. Grandma, you want a chair?
Oh, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for listening.
The favorite memory for your mother, grandmother, and me was after I got my doctorate, unknown to us, and we didn't know the church was doing this, but they gave us a trip to the Holy Land as a kind of congratulations that we had finished this thing.
Wow.
And that probably was, and your grandma may think of something other that was more so, but it's the first time she and I really got to do anything without family. However, your mother and your uncle were not happy. They thought they were going to get to go.
Oh, no. So they had to stay.
And they had to stay.
Okay.
And anyway, we were stunned. And so we got a trip, and it was 18 days.
Whoa.
It was huge, a huge trip. And I'll note that one of these days. It was really worthwhile. Probably one of the best memories we had.
Wow.
As far as favorite memories with my father and mother, was traveling to Oregon the first time, never having been out of Southern California, never been in the trees. I just thought I'd gone to a different world.
Yeah.
And ending up living there. And probably with my dad, the most exciting thing that ever happened was I led him to become a Christian and baptized him myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What I remember about my grandmother, she was not a talker unless you got her talking. You know, she didn't instigate talk,
Okay.
but she loved to play cribbage, a card game.
Cribbage.
Cribbage.
That sounds
And
old.
so every time I got out of school, in junior high school, I was learning to play chess and all kinds of stuff. I would go home as quick as I could, sit down at her kitchen table, and we'd play cribbage, and we'd talk about my father and everyone. And I'd ask questions. I said, what about this dad wearing all this long hair when he was a kid? She said, yeah, I was hoping he was going to be a girl. I said, how did he feel about it? He hated it. He'd put his hair up in his hat. Then the boys would come along and knock his hat off. And then he'd whip a couple of them, put his hair back in. And And she said, of all the boys, all 6, of all the boys, your dad was the best one of the bunch.
What? Wow.
And 12 kids, that's quite a comment.
Yeah.
One of the memories I have of my grandfather was later when I was in college. And Grandma was taken to the hospital, and they needed someone to stay with him. And I was just in from Ohio, and they were looking around and saying, oh, who are we going to have stay with Grandpa? And then one looked over, well, he hadn't got anything to do. So they said, you're going to stay with Grandpa. I said, I don't know. I was not real close to my grandpa.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, you don't have to do anything. Grandpa runs things. You just, just go. So I said, okay. And it was really kind of fun because we talked about a lot of stuff. He said, well, we're having dinner tonight. And I said, what's that? Cannibal sandwiches. I said, what? Cannibal sandwiches. I said, what is a cannibal sandwich? I'll show you. Took a raw hamburger, put it on a sandwich. I said, that hasn't been cooked. He said, no, that's a cannibal sandwich. That's beef tartare in the old ways.
Wow.
And that's a memory I will not forget. I guess that's all of those.
Okay.
You ready for my cars?
We're gonna get into all of Grandpa's cars that he's ever owned, start to finish.
Oh, yeah.
You got them all down.
They're not necessarily in order.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Number 1.
Here we go. A 1938 Chevy sedan. A 1939 Chevy sedan. A 1939 Plymouth sedan. A 1940 Plymouth sedan. A 1942 Dodge Club Coupe. A 1934 Plymouth Coupe with a rumble seat behind it that would only go about 45 miles an hour top speed.
Wow.
A 1936 Plymouth, which I bought from somebody at work that had skirts on it, nice tailpipes, lowered in the back, and rumbled when you drove it.
Wow.
Then my 41 Ford, which was my favorite. Later, a 1954 Ford, a 1956 Ford,
Wow.
and then one I had for quite a while and had a wreck in, my 1949 Chevy convertible, which eventually it was red. And you might be interested to know that it was used in a robbery. And it was posted on our bulletin board at school, and I was needing a car. So I talked to the president, and he said, well, they got him over in Kentucky for armed robbery. Fortunately, they didn't find any bullets for his gun. I said, what? I mean, he was at school here. He said, yeah, got in with the wrong crowd.
Wow.
So I said, well, what do I have to do? He said, I'll take you. We're going to go over there. He'll sign over the pink slip. I think I paid $200, $250 for it.
Wow.
So I'm cleaning out the car, pull the seat back, and there's 8 bullets underneath the seat.
What?
If they found the bullets, he would have been armed robbery, life imprisonment.
Wow. What did you do, Grandpa?
I didn't turn him in.
You did him a favor.
No. I picked up this car that was pristine. The outside of it had been finished. It was at a junkyard. It was a 1937 Ford. I mean, hand-rubbed lacquer. There was only one failure. It didn't have a motor.
What?
Yeah, so I bought it for $100. Was telling my dad about it. He said, you what? I said, I bought this car. Beautiful car. It just doesn't have a motor. He said, you bought a car with no motor? Well, I'm going to get a motor. No. Where did you get it? I said, Dad, I want to get a motor. Don't worry. I was living away from home. I figured I could decide that.
Yeah.
He said, get in my car. Drove over to the guy and said, you beat my son out of $100. I want the money. Well, it's a good buy. I says, I don't care if it is good buy. You come get it. It doesn't have a motor. And so I'm hanging my head, and they came and took it away. It was probably worth today somewhere around $5,000 to $10,000 because of the outside condition.
Yeah.
I just did. They had blown the engine, and so we had to get a rebuild from, which is what I planned to do. From Sears, you could actually buy a short block, or you could buy the whole engine, put a new engine in it.
Wow, from Sears.
Yeah. Anyway, then I think it was a '79 Peugeot diesel.
Wow.
Your Uncle Mike got T-boned in that one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Then when we moved to the Antelope Valley, we had two cars. And we had just bought a 1968 Chevy Malibu. Loved that car. It was really nice. First really fine car that we ever owned. And I had a 1967 Volkswagen Squareback that we also had at the time, and a little tow trailer that we could stay at a campsite and have a place to sleep. A 1973 Chevy Impala, which I drove back and forth to Northridge when I was preaching down there.
Oh, wow.
It only had 35,000 miles on the engine, but it really needed a paint job. And the man who owned it was a cripple, so he operated everything from his hands. And then I found out after I bought it, which I didn't ask for money back, but they gave it back anyway. It was rusted out all the way around the window because it had one of those cloth tops that you have. You know what I'm talking about.
And they would get wet.
And it just went underneath it, and
I see.
I don't think she ever forgave me for taking the money. But anyway, before we got married, just about the time we were getting married, I bought a 1961 VW Black Bug. Another great mistake. And so there was the guy kept saying the tires are just a little low. I said, okay. So your grandma will fill in any blanks.
Uh-huh.
So I said, there's just something wrong. I want to take this over to a dealership because I bought it from off the lot. So I ended up going to this VW place and said, check it out, find out what's going on. He said, maybe the front end's out of alignment or whatever. So we're sitting there. We're in there about 2 hours, 3 hours. I said, what the heck is going on? And then all of a sudden, out of the back room comes the manager of the department, 3 mechanics, and the owner of the dealership. And I thought to myself, what's this about? And he said, that you're a 61 black VW? And I said, yeah. He said, you better come with us. What? So he took me in and put it up on the lift, and the whole frame was full of holes underneath. He said, you are fortunate you got here in this. If you'd hit a railroad track, the whole car would have come apart, and probably would have killed you.
Whoa.
And I said, well, what do I do? I just bought it. He said, someone took you for a ride. He said, there's nothing we can do. Drive carefully home. So,
wow.
I got my loan at the bank where I worked, so I went to them. I didn't know anything about loans and all that stuff. And they said, I'm sorry. We just loan money. We don't refund money. You bought it. You're stuck with it. So I'm sitting there talking to a guy, and I said, what do I do? He says, well, I know what I'd do. I said, what's that? He said, I'd take that sucker over across the river, trade it in on a new one. Oh, I don't know. I feel wrong about that. He said, don't worry, they'll suck it up. So I agonized over that. I said, I don't have a choice. I don't have the money. I've got to do something. And so I went across the river and lied some. And he said, well, how does it run? Oh, the engine runs well. And it did. And I said, the brakes are good. Okay. And why are you trading it in? Because this was 63 and that's a 61. Well, I just want a new one. He said, okay. And this guy was a salesman, of course. And he said, well, it'll be $1,830 for this nice cream-colored Volkswagen bug. Your grandma, I don't think, has ever forgiven me for this whole car deal. So anyway, I traded it in, signed it off, signed the papers for the difference between the old car, which I'd had like a month, and he assumed the loan and drove it into the shop, and I, with trepidation, went out the driveway and got over into Ohio and said, I'm never coming back here again. Never did know what happened, but usually what they do is they have a lost car like that. They'll just call a junker, come get it. Anyway.
Wow.
You heard me talk about the Squareback. Probably the most dependable car we ever had. Your grandma rolled it once.
What?
Picking up Mike from the high school, and fortunately didn't hurt herself.
Wow.
She did crack a rib.
Grandma.
And she went and hit a soft spot across the side of the road.
And rolled the car.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I had a 1981 white Toyota, a 1991 black Toyota, Camry, both of them. And then I had a Honda Civic, a 1988, which Grandma drove through the garage door. Then I had a 1989 Buick, then a 1992 Toyota Avalon. Of course, out front I have a Toyota Scion, which is a 2006. Then a VW Passat, which is out front, 2012. A Toyota Highlander, 2003. And a 1961 Renault Dauphine, which I just about lost my life in.
Wow.
Somebody hit me from the rear when I was going to church. You wouldn't get that.
That's not me. It was, is that your phone out there? You got yours? Oh, that might have been Grandma's phone. Hold on. I'll check. Did you hear all that ringing, Grandma?
Yeah, I just checked it. It was one of those previous calls that I did.
Oh, okay.
I liked it. I just wanted to let you all know. Do you need anything else?
I think we're good.
You want, you want any more coffee or
I think I'm good on coffee.
more snacks?
You can reheat mine if you will.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
You
Grandma.
sure you don't want some more?
I'm good. You know what? I'll take a glass of water.
Okay.
Water would be great.
Do you want ice?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Be very nice.
Anyway, the Renault Dauphine was lighter than a VW Bug. And I got 42 miles to the gallon with it on the road.
Whoa.
But I stopped at an intersection in Kentucky, and a guy hit me at 60 miles an hour from the rear and drove the engine all the way into the back seat and me up against the back window and then me underneath the front end because he knocked me into another car.
Huh.
But I came out with just a whiplash. I had a 1939, which I bought from a cousin, which had dual carburation because it was a straight six, and it would go like the wind.
Oh, wow.
And I could beat all the V8s, and they wanted to know how I could do that. I said, "You're not opening the hood." I'm not telling you.
You can just do water, Grandma. Just water's okay.
And a Chevy hatchback, 1984 gray Cavalier. I had a 1939 Plymouth coupe. I had the motorhome, 1993, and another 1941 Plymouth.
Wow. Thanks, Grandma. Whoa. 32, huh? Wow.
And there's some I've forgotten.
So, give me your top three. Number one is the 41 Ford, right?
Yeah.
That's number one. What's 2 and 3?
My 42 Dodge.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got T-boned in that one.
What?
I guess I'd have to say my 49 Chevy convertible.
Ooh, okay. What'd you like so much about the 49 Dodge?
That's a 42.
42 Dodge.
It was cool. Things I didn't like, it had hydromatic drive, which was something that's new in the 42.
Uh-huh.
And the way it worked, you had a clutch, but you didn't have to use it. You could just shift anyway without the clutch.
Hmm.
It's really hot.
I know, I see.
Really hot. It wants to get burned.
Okay. So those are all your cars, and those are your top 3 cars. Wow. Thanks for putting that together, Grandpa.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I got a couple questions from some anonymous viewers.
What?
What?
You mean somebody actually read the blog?
Yep. Actually, just one question for this session. But your favorite toy as a child?
Didn't have many toys.
Oh, of the few you had, you could be any age, but it has to be your favorite. You didn't grow up with a lot, did you?
No. But I did one Christmas. My dad came to me, because I'm the oldest, and he said, "It's going to be a real hard Christmas. And so I'm only going to be able to get you one thing. So let me know what it is that you really, really want." And he did the same with the other kids. And I said, "Well, Dad, I always wanted a watch." And he said, "Okay, I'll get you a watch." So that was that Christmas. I got one gift. When I saw my friends, they said, "Well, what did you get?" I said, "I got my favorite gift, a watch."
Wow.
Now, one other thing that I appreciated my dad made was homemade slingshots.
Ooh.
Yeah, he would carve it, put rubber around it, especially during the war.
Mm-hmm.
And he would put a patch on the bottom, and then we'd practice and pretty much could pick a bird off a tree.
Whoa.
If you got practice well enough. So that was my favorite. As far as the gifts were concerned, one of them was a bow and arrow, but it got broken.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Your cousin broke it?
Yeah.
Snapped it? That's right.
Yeah. Well, one thing that was a disappointment was had an uncle that came down out of Idaho who was a hunter, and he had come with a gift. And my uncle Dallas and my uncle or my cousin Danny had just moved into our back house, and so he didn't know that they were there. And so he came in and he said, "I got a couple of gifts for the kids." He said, "I've got a Monopoly game, which we really enjoyed, and a .22 rifle for your son.
Whoa.
I thought, whoa, I am Dad. Dad was a hunter, you know,
Uh-huh.
and so he didn't hunt when he got older, but all the boys had to hunt. They used to say 1 bullet, 1 varmint, 1 meal, or you don't get to go the next time.
Really?
Yeah, you don't waste bullets. But anyway, so I'm all primed, you know, I'm going to get this. Dad said, no, that's not fair. You ought to give the gun to Danny.
Who's Danny?
He's my cousin,
Oh, your cousin.
1 month older than me.
A month? Is he the one that broke your bow and arrow?
No, it's a
Okay.
different one.
Different cousin.
No, this is the one that someday I'll get you. He's the one that tried to get me in trouble a lot.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, that was a great disappointment as a kid. Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
That's it for questions now. I think let's where did we leave off on your story? You had just driven west out of the middle of LA because the buses only ran right to left. And your uncle drove up.
Oh, okay.
Your uncle drove up and picked you up.
I was coming from Oregon
Yes.
in high school graduation. Well, my uncle picked me up, and he took me to his house, he was always very accepting of Dad's kids. My sister Gloria actually lived with him for a while as well. But anyway, when I got here, I didn't have a job, and I was thinking, I really don't know what I'm going to do. Mom and Dad had been in downtown LA area, but had moved out to the desert, and so I don't know. Didn't know what to do, so I had a cousin that lived in Hawthorne, and I went over to see Ralph and got to know his wife Marie, and so we hung around together some. Another cousin, by the way, and she was a go-getter. She was one of these that if you had a problem, she'd like to fix it. And so she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I said, I'd like to find a job, but this is such a big area. I don't know where to even start to look. She said, well, let me call Eddie. Oh, that's another cousin, Ralph's brother. And I said, you think he knows something? We'll find out. So she calls him, and he was kind of reticent, you know. He didn't remember me that much. And he said, well, I just can't get him on at Northrop because of nepotism. So I got my brother on, and he was supervisor. I didn't know anything about that in the data processing area. And they talked for a little bit more, and he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me talk to him. And so he put me on the phone. He said, now if I want to put your name up for some job, you got to promise me you're going to stick it out. You're not going to just walk away. And he wanted me to work at least a year. I said, yeah, fine. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. And he said, I've got a friend at Douglas. Works same thing I do. Let me give him a call. And I had already gone over to Douglas to try to find work, and there were no hiring. I said, Douglas, well, they just told me there was no hiring. He said, don't you worry about it. I'll take care of it.
Whoa.
Okay. So there I am at Ralph's and Marie's, and I've got an appointment with the personnel guy. I said, that guy's already turned me down 3 times. I don't know if I want to look him in the eye. So I dressed up real nice, and Marie looked at me. She said, "You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it." She kind of mothered me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Just go in and tell him who you are. Don't just apply for a job. Give him your name." Okay? So I go in and he looks at me. Said, "I just told you yesterday there's no openings." "Yes, I know, but I'm supposed to tell you something." He said, "What?" I said, "My name." And I gave him my name. "Oh, that's different." And there was a request made for me by name.
Wow.
And so I went to work at Douglas in data processing, which was early computer.
Yeah. What did that entail? What was the day to day?
Well, as you know, those cars over there, the ones on the corner, yeah.
These. Is this from there?
That's from actually from the bank. And it was punch cards.
Wow.
Those have not been used. And what we had was a myriad of machines. And they started out with a key punch operation, where somebody like a typewriter would punch holes in a card. And then they would give them to us, and we would sort them. And there was a thing called an electronic sorter. And then we had a thing called, with the old material, which was the balance sheets. You would play the balance sheet out, and then you'd go to a collator and you'd put them together. Then you would go to an interpreter, another machine. And the interpreter is like today's printer, but it only printed at the top of the cards, giving the numbers and everything and name of the individual or group. Then you went from there to the computer, which was a 126 UNIVAC. And there was a hole that was put in it in the master. I can't remember now exactly how we did that, but it made it possible to separate them. And so then we would take the cards that we sorted together, and we'd run it through the computer. And the one card would just have a payment, say, for example, like the bank, or they might have new material for an aircraft, and you would punch that into the new card. So you had the old card and the new card. Then you put it through a separator, and separated the old cards from the new cards. Then you took the new card and you went over to the printer. Now the printer was about 3.5 to 4 feet high, and about 2.5 to 3 feet wide. All mechanical, electronic. You would run the cards in the bottom, and it would print on a piece of paper like we would do today. And it was a report that you sent back to headquarters or to the department or whatever. It was cost, evaluation. It had all the ideas of what you do now in a thumbnail type thing, but you do everything on your computer. Because you could, you got Wi-Fi, you can print everything.
Right.
So eventually I ended up in college, or working my way through college, running that kind of equipment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I worked there at Douglas and quit every night. And I said, I don't understand this. I don't know what I'm doing. They're not teaching me anything. And they taught me nothing.
Wow.
And my uncle would say, well, give it another day. I said, no, it's embarrassing. I said, I put all these cards into this thing called a sorter, and it's all jammed up full of broken cards and everything, and I must not know how to do this. He said, well, go in and talk to somebody. So I went in, And they started laughing. I said, "What's that about?" He said, "Well, we just gave you scrap to run. We were trying to teach you how to run the machine. Nothing you have matters."
What? Wow.
And I said, "Oh, well, over the years," and I worked there for a couple summers as well, when I mustered out the last time, I got a rating, as I do at Douglas.
Huh.
And the guy looked at my rating and he said, "I've never seen one like this." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "You got a AAA rating." He said, "You never get a AAA rating."
Wow.
He said, "You got the highest rating of any employee."
Wow.
Because I had a work ethic. I was a worker when I was at the drive-in theater. I was responsible. And, but I went, "Oh, that's strange."
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well
that's
done.
that's what happened there. So time went on, and I had I was living in a little apartment away from my uncle's, and my cousin Ralph and Marie said, and he worked at Northrop, and she said, "Well, if you'll come here, I'll do your laundry. If you don't mind sleeping in the living room, and you can pay me 15 or whatever a week, or a month or whatever,
Mhm.
and you can live here, and I'll fix meals and all that kind of stuff." Well, that sounded pretty good. So I said, "Sure," because the little room I had you couldn't cook, you didn't have anything, you didn't even have a popcorn popper, nothing.
And where was that? What city's that?
That was it on Aviation Boulevard,
Okay.
right across from Douglas.
Huh. Okay.
But of course, they were in Hawthorne, right around the corner.
Right.
So I started living with them, and time went on. And one of the guys at work said, "I'm going to get a apartment, but I need somebody to go along with me." So I said, "Okay, probably a good idea for me to get a place." And so we went and looked, and boy, I tell you, we went to Hermosa Beach, and that was a cool place,
Yeah.
up in the second floor overlooking the ocean. Really brand new building. And I thought, boy, this is really nice.
Huh.
So now his name is David Dillard, and he's an artist, that is, painter, and went to art school in Chicago. No girlfriends, which made me nervous. But anyway, not that anything ever happened. So we were, he taught me to like jasmine tea. And I said, "Jasmine? What is jasmine tea?" He said, "Oh, it's really good." Okay. We had this pristine kitchen,
Mhm.
hardly ever used it. And so one day we got to discussing art, and he was teaching me what he was doing in his room. He says, "That smell you get is I keep adding more and more layers on this painting." And I thought, well, it didn't make much sense to me. It just looked like a bunch of streaks. And but I said, "I'd like to learn. So you teach me how that is beneficial. That, how you came to think that this is the way to express yourself." And he said, "Well, this is the avant-garde and all this kind of stuff, So he said, I said, "By the way, Dave, do you believe in God?" Because, see, I'd become a Christian back in Oregon. "Oh, I don't." Boy, that pulled me up quick.
Mm.
"You don't?" "No." So we had quite a discussion. And to summarize it, it went something like this. "Well, Dave, if you're right, and there is no God, and I live as if there is one, and I die, what have I lost?" I don't know, he said. But let's turn the corner. Let's say there is a God, and you live out your life, and you die, and after that comes the judgment. And there really is a God. He said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And a week later, he came in and told me, I'm leaving. I quit my job this week and I'm going back to Tennessee. And so now I'm stuck with this apartment I can't afford.
Mm.
And I said, what am I going to do? I can't afford this. So I went over to Manhattan Beach. There was some ads, and I saw this little studio apartment in an older part of the town. And that's where I moved in to Manhattan Beach.
And how old were you?
18, 19.
Wow. You're still working at Douglas, right?
Mm-hmm. So then, in the middle of all that, I said, well, you're some kind of Christian. You don't even go to church. Well, maybe I should change that. So I said, I don't know anything here. I don't even know where to go. So I said, well, maybe God will guide me. So I got out the phone book and opened it up. And I said now that it was a Church of Christ in Oregon. And they talked about Christian Church, Church of Christ. And I said, so I'm just going to close my eyes and put my finger on one of these churches and go visit. So it did. I put my finger down on it. And it was Englewood First Christian Church. So I went that Sunday morning. I was not impressed. It was a bigger church for one thing. And they didn't seem very friendly. And I'm thinking, I don't think I'm going to come back here. Mm. And so I'm sitting there and nobody says anything to you. In a bigger church, they don't hardly talk to you. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there. Said, well, it's over. I'm going to go. So I get up and I start to go out the front door. The youth minister was in the choir. He ran all the way around the church and caught me at the door. And he had seen me, zeroed in on me and said, we got groups for your age group. I'd sure like to have you come.
Wow.
I said, well, that's nice. And just about that time, an older woman and man came up and welcomed me. And I said, well, maybe I will. And then the preacher gave me a warm welcome. And then the rest is history, really, because I came back week after week, got involved in the youth program. And Barry Trulock was the youth guy. And Barry says, I think, where are you going to go to college? I said, well, I've been thinking of going over to JC, and I don't really know. He said, why don't you go over where I go to school? I said, what's the name of it? Pacific Christian College. I don't know. What do you study there? Become a preacher? I said, no, I don't think so. And he kept working me pretty good. And during that period of time, I really got under conviction. Mm-hmm. And he kept saying, you need to respond. And so I said, well, Barry, it's such a big decision. And I was awake at night in my little apartment, wondering, is this really what my life is supposed to be? Now, I wasn't dating anyone. And I did date some at the end of that period. But anyway, so I'll never forget that moment. I just sat upright in the bed and I said, well, God, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. And it was just a relief came over me because, my brother had already suggested that's what I ought to be doing. Well, anyway, So I went back and told Barry, okay, I'm going to do it. He was really happy. And he told Brother Morgan, who was our pastor. And so I kind of forgot about everything. And one day I was at the church because I worked nights. I was there during the day, and he said, "Would you come in here for a minute?" I said, "Sure." So I came in, and he said, "I understand you're going to go into the ministry, maybe." I said, "Yeah, I guess so." Barry just talked to me, and he was a part-time youth guy. He said, "Well, I think that's a great idea." He said, "I'm on the board of Pacific Christian College, and I'm on the board of San Jose Bible College as well.
Oh.
But I see promise in you, and so I would really like for you to consider going to the school that I graduated from." I said, "Well, where's that?" "Cincinnati." "Cincinnati what?" "Ohio." "Ohio." I'd never been that I knew of east of L.A. or Oregon or Washington. I was a West Coast guy.
Right.
And so he said, "It's a bigger school. You get a better education." And I found out later, Pacific only had 67 students, and San Jose only had 34. So you got a good education, but you
Wow.
you didn't get much diversity. Let's
Right.
just put it that way.
Right.
So anyway, the time came to leave town, and I went in and I put in my resignation at Douglas. And Brother Morgan says, "I'll take you to the airport." I said, "I'm flying?" He said, "Oh yeah, you don't want to try to drive. It's a long ways." "Oh, okay." I'd been up in a plane once and was scared spitless because I was going to try to learn to be a pilot. And it was a 4-engine prop plane. And so I got in it and I got up to the thing, and he said, "Now, just pay attention to what they tell you, because if you've never flown, you don't know what you're supposed to do." And sure enough, I ended up in Chicago, not realizing there's a time change, and almost missed my flight to Cincinnati.
Wow.
So what happened then was he took me to Van Nuys Airport, which is now
It's like a small private airport there now.
no, not that one, but the Burbank.
Oh, Bob Hope.
Yeah, Bob Hope
Okay.
took me there, and I thought, boy, this is really an adventure. I talked it over with my mom and dad and said what I had decided. We was up in the Yucca Valley discussing it. My mother was so funny. She said, "Well, all right, I don't want you to be one of them missionaries, and they put you in a tub and cook you and eat you." I said, "Mother."
That's funny.
So I got on the plane, flew back. I'd never been in humidity. Never been in it. And never that I remember, I was a baby.
Yeah.
So we landed in Chicago, and the Chicago airport was pretty cool that day, so it wasn't bad. And they finally started paging me, and I was thinking I had a couple hours, and I had a couple minutes, and I had to rush over and get on the next plane.
Yeah.
So I flew into Cincinnati, got off, and I was really disoriented. And "You mean this is Kentucky?" "Kentucky?" "Yeah, the airport for Cincinnati's in Kentucky." "Oh, okay. Well, how do I get to Cincinnati?" "Oh, there's a bus right here. Just take you right in." So I get on the bus, and they take me to downtown Cincinnati, and there's a thing called Fountain Square, which is a whole bunch of bus terminals right downtown. So I asked, I said, well, I don't know. I'm supposed to go to this Price Hill, wherever that is, for school. Oh, you take Price Hill's bus. It's in number 4 or whatever. And I'm standing there, just sweat running off of me. And I said, is it always this hot? And the guy says, no, sometimes it's worse.
What? Wow.
He really said that.
Oh no.
So then they get me to the bottom of the hill, and not in Price Hill, and I thought, you mean I got to climb this hill with my suitcase and everything, and it's like this?
Whoa.
They let you off at the bottom, and so I get off of the local bus, and I mean, it is August. It is really hot. And so there I am with a coat on, going up this hill. And it's kind of a raggedy thing that it's just a path.
Yeah.
So I finally get to the top of the hill, and here's the president of the school, happens to be out there on the parking lot. Now, he had promised me a job through my preacher. Said, no problem, we'll get him a job. He said, oh yeah, I got you. Your room is right there. And it was no air conditioning, by the way. And so I get up in that room and said, well, it's an awful big room. And one guy was there. He says, yeah, this will be 5 of us in here. I said, 5? Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
And I am really suffering now. It's really hot.
Yeah.
And then it starts to rain, and it cools off. So I go out and stand under a tree just to get cool. And the guy says, you better not stand here. And I said, why is that? He says, well, frequently lightning hits these trees, and you could be whacked.
What?
I said, does that happen often? He said, yeah. You better go on in.
Whoa.
So I went in, and I was so tired. I laid down, and I said, this is the biggest mistake of my life. Oh. And so began my college education.
It's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Tune in next time, guys.
Okay.